L. You're just the maid's son. You don't belong at this table. Those were the AST words a billionaire said before a 12-year-old boy destroyed his entire world with 5 playing cards. What happened next was caught on camera. 50 million people watched it. And it changed everything we think we know about intelligence, worth, and who deserves to be underestimated. This is the true story of how one card game became the most expensive lesson a billionaire ever received. And I promise you, by the end of the story, you'll never look at a quiet person in the corner the same way again. Let me take you back to where it all began. Welcome to Reality Untold Stories. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Section 1. The Invisible Boy, 1,000 Words. Let me tell you about a boy named Daniel, just 12 years old, sitting in the corner of a room where he wasn't supposed to matter, where nobody saw him as anything more than part of the furniture. Picture this: Dubai, one of those glass towers that touches the clouds. The kind of building where each apartment costs more money than most people see in their entire lives. On the 45th floor, there's a penthouse that belongs to Victor Ashford, a real estate mogul who made his billions buying and selling properties across 3 continents. Every Friday night, Victor hosts poker games. The city's wealthiest people gather around his custom-made tables, betting amounts that could feed entire villages. They call it charity, you see. Everyone pays $10,000 to play, and supposedly some of that money goes to help poor children get education. But if you look closely, most of that cash ends up funding projects that only help people who are already rich. Daniel's mother, Grace, works as Victor's housekeeper. She cleans those marble floors until they shine like mirrors. She serves drinks to people who don't say, "Thank you." She works 14-hour days, 6 days a week, just to keep a roof over their heads and food on their table. And because Grace can't afford childcare, Daniel comes with her to work. That's how Daniel ended up in that corner, week after week, watching these powerful people play cards. To them, he was invisible. Just another piece of furniture, like the expensive couches or the crystal vases. They talked about their business deals right in front of him. They discussed their secrets as if he couldn't hear. They played their card games as if he couldn't see. But here's what they didn't know. Daniel was watching everything. Not with the blank stare of a bored child, but with the focused attention of someone learning a completely new language. Every gesture, every expression, every tiny movement, he cataloged it all in his mind. You see, Daniel's grandfather, Thomas, had taught him something beautiful before he passed away. Thomas was a veteran, a man who'd survived war and poverty, who'd raised his family by working night shifts and playing cards on weekends to earn extra money. And before he died, he pulled young Daniel close and whispered, "Boy, poker isn't about the cards in your hand. It's about reading the souls of the people across from you. Everyone tells you their secrets if you know how to listen." For 2 years, Daniel had been listening. While these wealthy players assumed he understood nothing, he was building a library of knowledge in his young mind. He noticed that Mrs. Sophia always touched her diamond bracelet when she was about to fold a bad hand. Mr. David's left eye twitched just slightly when he was bluffing. Dr. Ahmed tapped his ring 3 times when he was calculating his odds. And Victor himself? He had the biggest tell of all. Whenever he felt uncertain, whenever his hand wasn't as strong as he pretended, his fingers would drift toward his Rolex watch. Just a small movement, but Daniel saw it every single time. After Victor's poker nights, Daniel would go to the public library. While his mother worked her second job cleaning offices downtown, he would sit at the old computers and study. Professional poker tournaments, probability charts, game theory, psychological strategies, all free on the internet for anyone willing to learn. The librarians thought he was doing homework. His teachers thought he was just a quiet kid who liked computers. Nobody suspected that this 12-year-old was teaching himself skills that professionals spend decades mastering. But Daniel wasn't learning poker for fun or fame. Every night, he watched his mother count their money, watched her skip meals so he could eat, watched her work until her hands were raw and her back ached. Every video he studied, every strategy he memorized, every small detail he noticed, it was all for her. To give her a better life. to prove that they deserved more than the world had given them. And Daniel carried something else with him always. In his pocket, wrapped in a piece of cloth, was an old poker chip his grandfather had given him. "Won this fair and square from a man who thought I was just a janitor," Thomas had said. "Show them who you really are, Daniel. Show them that intelligence doesn't come with a price tag." Tonight, that old poker chip felt heavier than usual. Because tonight, something was different in the air. Daniel could sense it the moment Victor and his guests arrived. There was extra cruelty in their laughter, extra arrogance in their voices. And as the evening wore on, that feeling grew stronger. Daniel sat in his usual corner, feet dangling from a chair too big for him, wearing his clean but faded clothes that screamed, "Doesn't belong here." And he watched. He always watched. Because in a world that treated him as invisible, watching had become his superpower. He didn't know it yet, but this night would change everything. This night, the invisible boy would become impossible to ignore. The evening started like any other Friday night. Rich people laughing, poker chips clinking, expensive whiskey being poured. Daniel sat in his corner, quiet as a shadow, doing what he did best, observing. Then Victor noticed something. Daniel had picked up a poker strategy book that someone left on the side table. His young fingers traced the pages, his eyes absorbing the information about hand rankings and betting patterns. And Victor, who'd had too much whiskey and was feeling especially cruel, saw an opportunity for entertainment. "Well, well, well." Victor's voice boomed across the penthouse, cutting through all the conversations. "Look at this, everyone. The helps boy thinks he can read poker books." All eyes turned to Daniel. Phones came out of pockets. This was too good to miss. Victor walked over and snatched the book from Daniel's hands, holding it up like evidence of a crime. "Tell you what, kid. Since you're so interested in poker, why don't you show us what you've learned? Give the adults some entertainment." Daniel's heart started racing, but he kept his face calm. Just like Grandpa Thomas taught him, never let them see your fear. Actually, Victor's eyes lit up with a cruel idea. "Let's make this interesting. One hand of poker. You versus me. If you somehow beat me, which is about as likely as pigs flying, I'll pay for whatever school you want. Full scholarship anywhere in Dubai." The room filled with laughter. People pulled out their phones to record. This was going to be hilarious, a 12-year-old poor kid against a billionaire real estate mogul. "But when I win," Victor continued, his voice getting harder, "and trust me, I will win. Your mother packs her bags tonight. She's fired. You both find somewhere else to live." The room went silent. This wasn't funny anymore. This was cruel. But nobody spoke up. Nobody told Victor to stop. They just aimed their cameras and waited for the show. Daniel looked toward the kitchen where his mother stood frozen, a glass trembling in her hands. For years of steady work, their small room in the staff quarters, her health insurance, everything hung in the balance of a card game designed to humiliate her son. "Come on, boy." Victor grabbed Daniel's arm, pulling him toward the poker table. "Don't be shy. Show these nice people what someone like you can do when you try to think." The crowd parted as Victor shoved Daniel into one of the leather chairs. Daniel's feet barely touched the floor. He looked so small, so young, so completely outmatched. Tony, the professional dealer Victor hired for these nights, looked uncomfortable. In 25 years of dealing cards, he'd seen a lot of ugly human behavior, but this felt different. This felt wrong. "Deal the cards, Tony," Victor commanded. "Unless you want to find a new job too." Tony's jaw tightened, but he started shuffling. His hands moved with the speed of a professional, but his eyes kept darting to Daniel with concern. $500 each to start," Victor announced, pushing a stack of chips toward Daniel. "Real money for a real game. Though I suppose for someone like you, $500 is quite a fortune, isn't it?" The crowd laughed again, but the laughter sounded hollow. Forced. Some people were starting to feel uncomfortable, but nobody had the courage to intervene. Daniel looked at the chips in front of him. $500. More than his mother made in a week. Then he looked across the table at Victor, this man who was about to destroy his family's life for sport, for entertainment, for the crime of a poor boy daring to read a book. And something shifted in Daniel's eyes. The scared little boy disappeared. In his place sat someone else entirely. Someone who'd been preparing for this exact moment for 2 years without knowing it. Tony dealt the cards with a soft whisper against the felt. 2 cards face down to each player. The room held its breath. Cameras recorded every second. Everyone expected to watch a child get crushed in minutes. They had no idea they were about to witness something that would destroy everything they believed about intelligence and worth. Daniel picked up his cards carefully, just like Grandpa Thomas had taught him. 7 of hearts. 8 of hearts. His face showed nothing, but his mind exploded with calculations. These were suited connectors, 2 cards in sequence, and the same suit. Not the strongest starting hand, but one with serious potential. Across the table, Victor glanced at his cards and couldn't hide a slight smile. Ace of diamonds, king of spades. One of the strongest starting hands in poker. In his mind, the game was already over. The scholarship money he'd never have to pay. The satisfaction of teaching this uppity kid a lesson about his place in the world. Your bet, Victor, Tony said quietly. Let's start small. Victor pushed $50 forward with a flourish. Don't want to scare the boy away too quickly. All eyes turned to Daniel. This was the moment everyone expected him to fold, to give up, to accept his place at the bottom of the social ladder. But Daniel had spent 2 years watching these people. 2 years learning their weaknesses. 2 years preparing for a moment he never knew would come. He pushed $50 forward to match the bet. I call, he said simply. The first ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. The kid wasn't folding. This might actually be interesting. Tony dealt 3 cards face up in the center of the table. The flop. 6 of hearts, 9 of clubs, 5 of diamonds. And Daniel's education was about to begin showing its worth. Let me explain what just happened, because this is where the story gets beautiful. Daniel's 7 and 8 of hearts, combined with the 6, 9, and 5 on the table, gave him what's called an open-ended straight draw. He needed either a 4 or a 10 to complete a straight, 5 cards in numerical sequence. With 8 cards left in the deck that could help him, he had about a 31% chance of making his hand. Not great odds, but not terrible either. Victor's ace-king, meanwhile, had completely missed the flop. He had what poker players call overcards, cards higher than anything on the board, but no pair, no nothing. He was essentially holding ace-high, which in poker terms means he had almost nothing. But here's the beautiful part. Victor didn't realize how weak his position was. In his mind, ace-king was still a premium hand, and he was facing a child who couldn't possibly understand advanced poker strategy. 50 more, Victor announced, pushing chips forward aggressively. He was trying to bully Daniel out of the pot, to end this quickly before the kid got lucky. This is where Daniel's 2 years of observation paid off. He'd seen Victor make this exact move dozens of times, betting aggressively when feeling strong. But something was different this time. Victor's hand moved toward his watch for just a split second before stopping. That tiny gesture, barely noticeable, told Daniel everything he needed to know. Victor was uncertain. Instead of folding like everyone expected, Daniel did something that shocked the room. I raise, he said quietly. 150. The penthouse fell completely silent. You could hear the air conditioning humming. Someone's phone almost slipped from their hands. And 12-year-old child just raised a billionaire in a high-stakes poker hand. What just happened? Mrs. Sophia whispered to her husband. Tony, the professional dealer, leaned forward slightly. That raise wasn't random. The timing, the amount, the situation, it showed understanding of concepts that took most players years to grasp. This child just executed what professionals call a semi-bluff, betting with a drawing hand while also applying psychological pressure. Victor's confident smile faltered. This was supposed to be easy. A quick lesson about knowing your place. Why was this kid fighting back? Your move, Victor, Tony prompted. For the first time that evening, Victor hesitated. His fingers drifted toward his watch before he caught himself. The crowd that was laughing with him moments ago now watched with curious eyes. Call, Victor finally said, trying to sound casual, but his voice carried a note of uncertainty. Tony dealt the 4th card. The turn. 4 of diamonds. The room didn't understand what just happened, but Daniel's mind exploded with certainty. His 7-8 now had the board reading 6954. He'd completed his straight. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He had the nuts, the absolute best possible hand at this moment. Nobody could beat him with any two cards. It was mathematically impossible. But the beautiful part? Nobody else knew it. Victor still had his ace-king with nothing. Just ace-high. Trash in poker terms. But in his mind, he still had a premium hand, still had the advantage, still had intellectual superiority. Instead of betting aggressively with his unbeatable hand, Daniel did something that would impress world-class professionals. He checked. Just tapped the table gently, indicating he didn't want to bet. This is called slow playing or trapping. It requires ice-cold nerves and deep psychological understanding. Daniel was deliberately showing weakness with an unbeatable hand, inviting Victor to bet into him and build a bigger pot. Victor took the bait completely. 200, he announced, shoving chips forward with renewed confidence. In his mind, the kid's check confirmed everything. Daniel was weak, probably scared, definitely in over his head. The crowd murmured approval. This was more like it. The natural order being restored. But Daniel was reading Victor like a children's book. 2 years of observation had taught him every micro-expression, every unconscious gesture. When Victor made that bet, his nostrils flared slightly, the sign of someone feeling strong. His shoulders squared in dominance posturing. Most importantly, he didn't touch his watch, meaning he felt completely confident. Victor had no idea he just walked into a perfect trap. I raise, Daniel said quietly. 400. The words hit the room like a thunderbolt. Mrs. Sophia's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Mr. David's mouth fell open. Even Tony, who'd seen everything in 25 years of professional poker, blinked in surprise. A 12-year-old child just raised a billionaire to $400. This wasn't child's play anymore. This was serious money. Serious poker. Serious psychology. What the hell? Victor's composure cracked visibly. His hand jerked toward his watch before he caught himself. This was supposed to be entertainment, not a real poker match where he might actually lose. Tony leaned forward, his professional instincts screaming that something extraordinary was happening. The action is to you, Victor. This is ridiculous, Victor snapped, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. He's 12 years old. He doesn't know what he's doing. But even as he said it, doubt crept into his mind. The kid's betting pattern showed understanding of concepts that Victor himself didn't fully grasp. The timing, the sizing, the psychology, it was all too sophisticated for random luck. Mrs. Sophia whispered to her husband, "Maybe we should stop this." "No," Victor said loudly, his ego overriding his judgment. "I'm not being outplayed by the helpsbrat. Call." The pot now contained $800. Real money that could pay Grace's rent for 3 months. But more than money hung in the balance. Reputations, worldviews, fundamental beliefs about intelligence and worth, all of it about to be tested. Tony dealt the final card. The river. 5 of spades. The card changed nothing about the hand's strength. Daniel still had his unbeatable straight. Victor still had absolutely nothing. This was it. The moment of truth. The tension in that penthouse was so thick you could cut it with a knife. $800 sat in the center of that poker table, but everyone in the room knew this was about so much more than money. Daniel studied Victor's face with surgical precision. Every micro-expression, every unconscious movement, he cataloged it all. Victor's breathing had quickened. His pupils were dilated with stress. His fingers kept drifting toward that expensive watch before stopping. The universal sign of uncertainty and fear. The man was breaking down, and he didn't even realize it. "Check," Daniel said softly, tapping the table. It was the perfect move. By checking with an unbeatable hand, he was giving Victor one final chance to bet into him, to commit even more money to a pot he couldn't win. It was psychological warfare at its finest, showing weakness while holding ultimate strength. Victor's mind raced. The kid checked again. That has to mean weakness, right? Children don't have the sophistication for advanced deception. This was his chance to end this humiliation and restore the natural order of things. All in, he declared, shoving his remaining $150 into the center. Every last chip. Let's see what you're really made of, boy. The room gasped. Victor just committed everything he had to a pot he couldn't win against a 12-year-old who'd been outplaying him since the first card was dealt. Daniel looked at the chips, then at Victor's face, then at all those cameras recording every moment of what was about to become legendary. "I call," he said simply. Before anyone could show their cards, Tony stood up from his chair. His professional reputation demanded he speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice cut through the tension like a blade, "I need to explain what you're witnessing here." He gestured toward the cards spread across the table. "I've been dealing professional poker for 25 years. What this young man just executed is master-level strategy. The betting pattern, the psychology, the trap, this is what professional players spend decades learning." Mrs. Sophia set down her wine glass. "What do you mean, Tony?" "Look at the sequence," Tony explained. Daniel called the initial bet, then raised on the flop when he had a drawing hand. That's called a semi-bluff, and it requires deep understanding. When the turn card came, he checked with what I suspect is a very strong hand, then raised when his opponent bet. That's textbook slow playing. When the river came, he checked again, letting Victor bet everything into him. Mr. David leaned forward, his earlier smirk completely gone. "Are you saying the kid actually knows how to play?" "I'm saying," Tony's voice grew more serious, "that I've seen this exact sequence in World Series of poker tournaments. Professional players pay thousands of dollars for coaching to learn these concepts. This child just executed them perfectly against a man who thought he owned the world." The crowd's energy shifted dramatically. What started as cruel entertainment had become something else entirely, a reckoning with their own assumptions and prejudices. "This is impossible," Victor stammered, his face pale. "He's just a kid." "He's just what?" Grace's voice carried from the kitchen doorway. For the first time in 4 years, she spoke directly to Victor's guests. "Just brilliant? Just gifted? Just someone you never bothered to notice because of where he came from?" The room fell silent with the weight of truth. "Show your cards," Tony commanded, his voice carrying the authority of decades at poker tables worldwide. Victor's hands trembled as he flipped over his cards. Ace of diamonds, king of spades. He paused, letting it sink in. In poker terms, ace high means Victor has essentially nothing. No pair, no straight, no flush. Just his ace as a high card. It's about as weak as a hand can be. The reality hit Victor like a physical blow. He'd just bet nearly $1,000 with nothing. All eyes turned to Daniel. Those cameras focused on his small hands as he reached for his cards. The invisible boy was about to become impossible to ignore. "Let me show you something my grandfather taught me," Daniel said, his voice clear and steady. "About reading people." "Ace-king," Tony announced. "Also known as Big Slick." With the final board of 69545, Victor has ace-high. He paused, letting it sink in. In poker terms, ace-high means Victor has essentially nothing. No pair, no straight, no flush. Just his ace as a high card. It's about as weak as a hand can be. The reality hit Victor like a physical blow. He'd just bet nearly $1,000 with nothing. All eyes turned to Daniel. Those cameras focused on his small hands as he reached for his cards. The invisible boy was about to become impossible to ignore. "Let me show you something my grandfather taught me," Daniel said, his voice clear and steady. "About reading people." He flipped over his cards. 7 of hearts. 8 of hearts. Tony's eyes widened. 7-8 of hearts, with the board showing 69545. He paused, calculating. That gives Daniel a straight. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The room erupted in gasps and shocked whispers. "A straight beats ace-high," Tony announced, his professional composure cracking with genuine amazement. "Daniel wins." But then Tony turned to address the stunned crowd, his voice carrying the weight of professional authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you just witnessed wasn't luck. This young man held the winning hand since the 4th card was dealt. But instead of betting aggressively, he slow-played it perfectly. He trapped Victor into committing every chip to a pot he could never win. That's not beginner's luck. That's advanced psychological warfare. Victor stared at the cards in complete shock, his brain unable to process the reality in front of him. The mathematics are quite simple, actually, Daniel said, his young voice cutting through the chaos. You had about a 6% chance of winning after the turn card. I had the nuts, the best possible hand. You bet everything on a 6% chance because you couldn't read the situation. The words hit Victor like bullets. Not just the poker lesson, but the calm, analytical way this 12-year-old was explaining how thoroughly he'd been outplayed. But more importantly, Daniel continued, standing up in his chair to address the room, you couldn't see my strength because you were blinded by your assumptions about my worth. The crowd began to applaud. Slowly at first, then building to thunderous approval. The game was over. The money was won. But the real victory was just beginning. Sometimes I think about that night and wonder how many brilliant minds are sitting in corners right now, watching, learning, waiting to be noticed? How many Daniels are out there, invisible to people who think intelligence comes with a price tag? Let me tell you what happened next, because this is where the story becomes truly beautiful. The video went viral within 24 hours. Mr. David posted it online, and suddenly the whole world was watching a 12-year-old boy systematically dismantling a billionaire's worldview with nothing but intelligence and patience. 50 million views. 100 million. The numbers kept climbing. #PokerGenius started trending worldwide. But more importantly, people started asking questions. Important questions about how we judge intelligence, about who we notice and who we ignore, about the dangerous cost of our assumptions. 3 weeks after that night, Mrs. Sophia approached Grace with an offer. I need someone to manage my family's charitable foundation, she said. Someone who understands what real intelligence looks like and how easily we can overlook it. The salary is triple what Victor was paying you. Grace accepted. And within months, she proved that all those years of managing wealthy households had taught her skills that translated perfectly to managing multi-million-dollar philanthropic projects. Together, Grace and Mrs. Sophia created the Thomas Foundation, named after Daniel's grandfather. They awarded 47 full scholarships in the first year alone. Not to kids with perfect test scores or fancy essays, but to brilliant children from working families who'd been sitting quietly in corners, absorbing everything while adults assumed they didn't matter. Applications to chess and poker clubs in community centers across Dubai increased by 400%. Libraries reported massive spikes in strategy game book checkouts. Parents started paying attention to their quiet children, wondering what genius might be hiding behind those observant eyes. As for Victor, his fall was swift and complete. His business partners distanced themselves within days. His company's board requested his resignation within weeks. Nobody wanted to be associated with the man the whole world watched humiliate a child for entertainment. His wife left him. His children stopped speaking to him. The penthouse where he once hosted poker games for the city's elite was sold to pay legal fees. The new owners converted it into a learning center for gifted children from underserved communities. Victor now lives in a small apartment, eating microwave dinners and watching news coverage of Daniel's continued success with the bitter knowledge that he created his own downfall. His assumptions cost him everything. Meanwhile, Daniel's achievements continued to astound everyone. Perfect scores in advanced mathematics and psychology. Captain of the debate team and chess club. Early admission offers from universities around the world. But he never forgot where he came from. Every Saturday morning, Daniel returns to the community center where his grandfather first taught him to shuffle cards. He teaches poker fundamentals to a new generation of children who might otherwise go unnoticed. I see kids who remind me of myself, he tells anyone who asks. Quiet ones, smart ones, kids whose potential is invisible to people who judge intelligence by zip codes and bank accounts. The poker room at that community center is now named the Thomas Memorial Room, with his grandfather's photograph hanging above the main table. And that old poker chip, the one his grandfather gave him? It sits in a glass case beside the photo, a reminder that worth isn't determined by circumstances. Tony, the professional dealer who witnessed Daniel's breakthrough, became an unlikely mentor. "That kid changed how I think about talent," he says in interviews. Real skill doesn't announce itself with expensive clothes and fancy accessories. Sometimes it sits quietly in the corner, watching and learning, waiting for someone to give it a chance. The scholarship winners from the Thomas Foundation are already making their mark. A 13-year-old girl from a fishing village won the national science competition. A boy whose parents work construction got early admission to engineering school. A young girl is developing an app to help other kids from single-parent homes access educational resources. "We're not just funding education," Grace explains from her foundation office, which overlooks the same public park where Daniel used to play while she worked multiple jobs. "We're proving that brilliance exists everywhere. You just have to know how to recognize it." Business schools now teach the Victor Ashford case study as an example of how unconscious bias leads to catastrophic decision-making. The poker community embraced Daniel as a symbol of the game's democratic nature, where skill matters more than background. At 14, Daniel speaks at conferences about psychology and human behavior. His message is always the same, delivered in that calm, clear voice that once shocked a penthouse full of billionaires. Intelligence isn't inherited through wealth. Brilliance isn't passed down through privilege. Genius grows wherever curiosity meets opportunity, even in the shadows where society doesn't think to look. I think about Daniel's story whenever I'm tempted to judge someone by their circumstances. Whenever I see a quiet child in the corner. Whenever I assume I know someone's worth based on their clothes or their job or where they come from. Because somewhere right now, another Daniel is sitting in a corner, watching and learning. Another brilliant mind is being overlooked because they don't fit our narrow definition of what genius looks like. Another child is waiting for just one person to see their potential. The real lesson of Daniel's story isn't about poker or money or revenge. It's about the beautiful, terrifying truth that we're surrounded by genius every single day, and most of us are too blind to see it. Victor learned that lesson the hard way. He lost everything, his fortune, his reputation, his family, all because he couldn't see the brilliant mind sitting right in front of him. Don't be Victor. Look closer. Listen better. Notice the quiet ones. Because the next time you dismiss someone as unimportant, you might be overlooking the very person who could teach you something extraordinary. Daniel taught a billionaire that lesson with 5 cards and perfect patience. What will it take for the rest of us to learn it?